So by the year 2026, Agentic AI is projected to command 40% of enterprise AI budgets across the EU.
Which is just a staggering number.
Right, 40%. I mean, up from just 12% today. That is a massive structural shift in how businesses are going to operate.
It really is.
But there is this massive catch. If you deploy these autonomous systems without the right guardrails, you could actually trigger EUAIAC penalties of up to 30 million euros.
Yeah, or 6% of your global annual revenue. Global annual revenue, which for almost any organization is an extinction level fine. The regulatory landscape is, it's shifting from theoretical guidelines to hard financial consequences.
Wow. So today we were doing a deep dive into a really comprehensive blueprint published by AetherLink.
Right.
And for those of you evaluating your own AI adoption, you probably know AetherLink as the Dutch AI consulting firm behind Aetherbot, AetherMine, and AetherDV.
Yep, exactly.
So they've laid out the survival guide for the impending 2026 regulations. And our mission today is to figure out how European business leaders, CTOs, developers, how they can chase that massive ROI of AI agents without, stepping on those regulatory landmines.
And those landmines are getting very real.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because deploying agentic AI right now, it feels a lot like being handed the keys to a ridiculously fast Formula One car.
I love that analogy, yeah.
But the track you're racing on is completely invisible, and it is entirely rigged with tripwires.
And the clock is officially ticking on those tripwires. The EUAIAC's mandatory enforcement for high-risk systems actually hits in August 2026.
Okay, so that's right around the corner.
Right. So if organizations are deploying these systems right now without a strict governance framework, they aren't just experimenting. They are actively building what AetherLink calls regulatory debt.
Regulatory debt. Ouch.
Yeah. Every single ungoverned agent you integrate into your workflow today, that's a compliance violation you will have to painstakingly dismantle and rebuild tomorrow.
That sounds like an absolute nightmare for developers. But to really understand why the regulators are bringing down the hammer so hard, I think we need to draw a hard line between the familiar, often frustrating customer service bots we've all used.
Oh, yeah. The ones that just go in circles.
Right. Differentiating those from true agentic AI, because the word AI gets thrown around so much that the actual mechanical differences kind of get lost.
Yeah, the root of that confusion really comes down to what AetherLink calls the autonomy gap.
The autonomy gap?
Right. So chatbots just respond to prompts. You ask a question, you get an answer. It's a single-turn interaction.
Sure.
But agentic systems, they're built on three entirely different architectural pillars. First is autonomous reasoning. They can actually engage in multi-step planning.
Meaning they don't need you to hold their hand for every step.
Exactly. If you give an agent a high-level goal, it can break that goal down into a sequence of smaller tasks and execute them one by one without a human hitting next or providing a new prompt.
It's basically figuring out the how on its own.
Yeah, exactly that. Second is tool integration. They have direct API access to your enterprise systems.
So they're actually inside the system.
Right. Your ERPs, your CRMs, your HR databases. They aren't just generating text. They are reading and writing data across your company's infrastructure.
Okay, wow.
And third, they possess iterative execution. If a standard script hits an error, it crashes.
Right.
If an agent tries a database query and gets an error, it can read the error message, realize its syntax was wrong, rewrite the query, and try again until it succeeds.
That autonomous resilience is just incredible. And, it translates directly to the bottom line. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
If you look at the Deloitte 2025 Enterprise AI survey they cited in the blueprint, 67% of organizations using these agentic systems see a 3 to 5 times ROI within 18 months.
Yeah, compared to just a 1.2x return for standard chatbots.
What stands out to you about that ROI jump? Because to me, it really highlights how underutilized this tech still is. I think of it like this. A chatbot is essentially a digital dictionary. You look things up in it,
right? But
an agent is like hiring a dedicated intern. An intern who can log in, check the accounting ledger, realize a supplier invoiced you twice, draft an email to that supplier to fix the error, and then write up a summary report for you all while you're asleep.
That's spot on. But connecting that massive leap in capability to the bigger picture, that reveals why regulators are suddenly stepping in so aggressively.
Because the intern can make mistakes.
Exactly. If a digital dictionary gives you a wrong definition, it's annoying.
Yeah.
But if your autonomous digital intern decides to unilaterally cancel a critical supply chain contract because it hallucinated a breach of terms across your ERP, that is a catastrophic business failure.
Yeah, that's not just annoying, that's a lawsuit.
Precisely. And that risk is exactly why EU enterprise adoption has essentially stalled at 18% past the pilot phase. People are scared.
And the fear of that catastrophic failure is entirely tied to the impending August 2026 EU AI Act enforcement.
Yes.
So if we are a business leader listening to this deep dive, and we want that 3 to 5 times ROI, what is the EU actually demanding we build into these systems?
Well, the Act lays out 5 non-negotiable requirements for high-risk agents. One is transparency. Humans must know they're interacting with an AI.
Makes sense.
And the agent's decision-making authority must be clearly disclosed. 2 is human oversight. Critical decisions require mandatory human review checkpoints.
Okay, so humans in the loop.
Right. 3 is bias testing. This means ongoing algorithmic impact assessments. 4 is data governance logs.
Okay.
And 5 is documented risk management, which requires written protocols for, failure modes.
Hold on, let's make those real for a second, because listing them out makes them sound like standard IT checkboxes.
They definitely aren't.
Right. Mechanically, how does something like a data governance log or bias testing actually work on an autonomous agent? We aren't just checking a box saying that AI isn't prejudiced, right?
Far from it. In the context of agentic AI, a data governance log means creating an immutable ledger of an agent's reasoning chain.
Meaning you can see its thought process.
Exactly. If an agent decides to reorder inventory, the log must show exactly which data points it looked at, say a specific cell in a spreadsheet at 2:04 p.m., and the exact probability weights it used to make that decision.
Wow, so complete traceability.
Complete. As for bias testing, it's about algorithmic impact on actual business operations. If your procurement agent is autonomously selecting vendors, you have to continually test its retrieval systems.
To make sure it isn't playing favorites.
Right, to ensure it isn't inadvertently deprioritizing suppliers from a certain geographic region simply because of, say, an artifact or imbalance in your historical purchasing data.
Wow. If you're a CTO listening to this, the sheer weight of those 5 mandates probably sounds like a development nightmare.
Oh, it's a huge shift.
Because in theory, perfect transparency and oversight sound great. But in practice, you can't just pause a live global supply chain when the auditors show up to check your reasoning logs.
No, you can't.
If you try to build the agent first and then bolt on these 5 requirements later, it's like trying to install seatbelts and airbags in a car while it's speeding down the highway.
Bolting compliance on after the fact is a guaranteed way to break your system.
Yeah.
I mean, AetherLink's core philosophy here is that compliance is an architectural decision made at design time.
It has to be baked in.
Exactly. You need an AI lead architecture, which integrates something called graceful degradation.
Graceful degradation, what does that actually look like?
So when an agent's confidence falls below a certain mathematical threshold, or it encounters a scenario outside its parameters, it shouldn't just crash.
Right.
And it definitely shouldn't guess.
Right.
It should gracefully degrade.
Meaning it pauses its own autonomy.
Yeah, it pauses the autonomous action and seamlessly escalates to a human. But it provides a package summary of all the context it gathered and what it was attempting to execute.
Oh, that's smart. So the human isn't starting from scratch.
Right. The supply chain doesn't stop. The specific decision just gets routed through a human oversight checkpoint momentarily, fulfilling that EU requirement without causing a massive bottleneck.
It's easy to talk about these rigid technical guardrails in theory, but I'm trying to picture what happens when they collide with the messy reality of enterprise workflows.
It gets complicated fast.
Because one agent is tricky enough, but a real business doesn't use just one. You need a whole team of them.
And multi-agent orchestration is where the complexity truly scales. It happens to be the specific challenge AetherDV focuses on.
Okay.
A standard workflow might require middleware coordinating 5 to 20 agents simultaneously.
20 agents talking to each other.
Yeah. You might have a risk assessment agent, an inventory agent, and a supplier quality agent. They all need to communicate, share context, update databases. And the danger here is a cascade failure.
Give me an example of how a cascade failure happens between agents. Like, what does that actually look like?
Okay. Imagine your inventory agent misreads a seasonal demand spike and autonomously orders 10 times the required materials.
Okay, a huge mistake.
Right. That massive purchase order instantly drains the quarterly budget managed by your finance agent, which then autonomously halts payroll processing because it thinks the company is suddenly out of cash.
Oh my God.
Yeah, one error cascades through the whole system.
Well,
So to prevent this, developers rely on RAG retrieval augmented generation.
because an agent relying solely on its underlying foundational training data from, say, 2023 is entirely useless for executing a trade today. It doesn't know what happened yesterday.
Exactly. RAG grounds the agent's reasoning in live, real-time enterprise data before it generates an action.
So it's looking at today's facts.
It pulls current inventory levels, today's pricing, existing contract terms. It retrieves the ground truth before it is allowed to reason at all.
Okay, that makes sense.
But beyond RAG, what's fascinating here is that the truly critical component for safety across multiple agents is how they physically access your systems. This brings us to the difference between traditional APIs and MCP model context protocol servers.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the difference between a traditional API and MCP is fundamentally about trust and control, right?
Exactly.
If I'm understanding the architecture correctly, giving an agent traditional API access is like handing an employee the company's master bank account routing number and just trusting them to buy office supplies without buying a yacht.
Yeah, blind trust.
But giving them an MCP server is like giving that employee a corporate credit card with strict, hard-coded category and spending limits.
That analogy hits at the absolute core technical difference. Traditional APIs require the agent itself to handle authentication, formatting, and error recovery.
Which is a lot to ask of the model.
Yeah, you are trusting the intelligence model to behave securely. MCP abstracts all of that away from the model. The protocol server provides standardized tool access, handles the authentication independently, and strictly enforces rate limits and permission boundaries.
So the model can't override it.
MCP ensures that even if an agent's reasoning somehow gets corrupted or it hallucinates, its physical ability to execute actions across your legacy systems is contained by the protocol's hard-coded guardrails.
So the agent can only spend what's on the card no matter how confused it gets.
Exactly.
Let's look at how that corporate credit card concept actually plays out on a factory floor. AetherLink's blueprint includes a fascinating case study of a mid-market manufacturer in Den Haag.
Why, this is a great real-world example.
Walk us through it.
So this manufacturer was managing 140 active suppliers across 3 different plants, and their human procurement team was just drowning in reactive work.
I can imagine.
They were spending over 200 manual hours a month just tracking contract renewal dates, monitoring defect rates, and negotiating routine price adjustments based on inflation.
That is so much busy work.
It is. So AetherLink deployed a highly orchestrated suite of agents to take over this baseline workload.
What did that suite actually look like?
Well, they built a contract monitor agent that scans for renewals and sends alerts 120 days out.
Okay.
They deployed a quality agent that specifically tracks delivery metrics and flags underperforming suppliers.
Nice.
Then they introduced a negotiation agent tasked with routine price adjustments based on live market data. And finally, an overarching compliance agent audited the logs of the other 3.
The results they publish are just wild. 170 manual hours saved every single month.
It's a huge shift.
That translates to 85,000 euros saved annually just in time and labor. And they saw 98% of renewals processed on time, up from 76%.
Which is massive for supply chain stability.
But this next metric genuinely shocked me. 340,000 euros in autonomous price optimizations. I have to push back here. Letting an AI haggle with human vendors?
People are very skeptical of that.
Rightfully so. Even an 8% variance at an enterprise scale could mean millions of euros. How do they trust the AI to know the difference between a smart concession and a massive financial leak that just destroys a key supplier relationship?
Your skepticism is exactly why the decision authority matrix is the most important part of this entire deployment. The negotiation agent was never given free rein to haggle.
Okay.
It was bound by incredibly strict MCP parameters. It was only allowed to autonomously negotiate price adjustments within a plus or minus 8% window of the historical baseline.
Ah, so it had very strict boundaries.
Yes, and it could only use verified supplier market data retrieved through its RAG database.
So it couldn't offer like a 30% discount just to close a deal quickly.
Never. The procurement, legal, and finance teams, they sat down long before deployment and defined the matrix. The agents were authorized to autonomously handle contract renewals under 100,000 euros and quality-driven price adjustments under 5%.
And if it went over?
Anything outside those exact financial parameters instantly triggered the graceful degradation protocol we talked about earlier.
It kicked it back to a human.
instantly. It provided the human with a summary of the market data and the supplier's counteroffer. The AI wasn't replacing the procurement team, you know.
Right. It was empowering them.
It was filtering out the low-stakes noise so the humans could focus all their energy on massive strategic vendor relationships.
Which makes sense.
And that clarity is the absolute secret to their 100% compliance audit pass rate.
It's incredible when it works quietly in the background like that, saving hundreds of thousands of euros on operational efficiency.
Yeah.
But after seeing how these agents revolutionize back-office procurement, we have to look at what happens when these autonomous systems step out of the background and interact directly with human beings.
Right, the front lines.
The 2026 engagement layer.
This is where things get really psychologically complex. Because the landscape of human-computer interaction is moving rapidly beyond text-only chatbots. The data indicates that by 2027, 34% of enterprises plan to deploy multimodal AI avatars.
Multimodal meaning?
We're talking high-fidelity voice, video generation, and real-time gesture recognition. Businesses want to use these avatars for complex customer onboarding, real-time dispute resolution, internal IT help desks.
Okay, wow.
But while the technology is remarkable, the EUAIAC regulates avatars incredibly strictly due to a specific psychological phenomenon, which is anthropomorphization.
Meaning treating the machine like it's a person because it looks like one.
Precisely. When an AI has a human face, warm, empathetic tone of voice, and physically nods when you speak, humans instinctively drop their guard.
We can't help it.
We subconsciously assume the avatar possesses human-level judgment, empathy, ethical reasoning.
Which it absolutely does not.
No, it is still just executing code and retrieving data based on its decision authority matrix. And because this psychological effect is so powerful, the compliance burden is massive. Organizations must provide explicit AI disclosure.
Meaning a disclaimer right up front.
Yes. The customer must explicitly consent and clearly understand they're dealing with an algorithmic system from the first second of interaction.
But if the avatar looks and sounds like a totally empathetic human customer service rep, how do we make sure the end user doesn't feel completely deceived?
That's a huge risk.
Especially in a sensitive situation like a billing dispute. I mean, if a customer is pouring their heart out about a financial hardship to what they think is a sympathetic human, and it turns out to be an MCP-restricted language model, the brand damage there is just immeasurable.
Oh, absolutely. That brand damage is exactly why the escalation pathways have to be entirely frictionless.
Frictionless?
Yeah. The moment a user requests a human, or the moment the avatar's sentiment analysis detects complex emotional distress, it must seamlessly hand off the interaction, passing the full context to a human representative.
So no repeating yourself to the human.
Exactly. Furthermore, multimodal interactions introduce massive GDPR implications.
Because video and audio interactions mean you are capturing biometric data.
Yes. You're capturing voice prints, facial microexpressions, cultural body language. This requires strict data retention, deletion, and access pathways built right into your architecture.
Wow.
And crucially, it requires continuous bias monitoring. If your avatar relies on voice recognition, you have to prove through audit logs that it works equally well for all regional accents.
Right.
You have to prove its gesture recognition doesn't consistently misinterpret cultural body language. The auditing required here isn't just a one-time check. It is a continuous operational necessity.
It's just fascinating how the closer the technology gets to mimicking us, the tighter the architectural leash has to be to protect us.
It really is a paradox.
We've covered an immense amount of ground today, from the technical depths of back-office RAG architecture and cascade failures, all the way to the front lines of multimodal avatars and biometric pathways.
It's a lot to take in.
Looking at AetherLink's entire blueprint, what is your ultimate takeaway for the leaders trying to navigate this?
For me, the essential shift has to be in mindset. Governance should not be viewed as a regulatory tax or an IT burden.
Oh.
Systematic oversight, clear decision matrices, and transparent audit logs are actually competitive advantages. They build profound trust with your enterprise clients. And more importantly, they prevent catastrophic operational errors.
Right.
An ungoverned AI might save your developers time in the short run, but the first time it hallucinates a compliance violation or triggers a cascade failure, it will cost you exponentially more in fines and brand damage than the governance architecture ever would have.
Yeah, you can't cut corners. For me, my takeaway is the sheer scale of the ROI when you actually take the time to build those tracks properly.
The numbers don't lie.
The contrast is undeniable. I mean, an old school chatbot that just answers a frequently asked question versus a multi-agent system that autonomously negotiates a supplier contract and saves a company 340,000 euros without human intervention.
It's a different world.
The technology is here, the value is absolutely proven. It just requires the discipline to build the safety chassis before you run the engine.
Absolutely. And, I will leave you with a final puzzle to mull over, building on that very idea of autonomous negotiation.
Oh, lay it on us.
So we talked about Den Haag's agent negotiating with human suppliers. But imagine this scenario in 2026. Your company's highly governed, fully autonomous procurement agent enters into a split-second negotiation with another company's highly governed, autonomous sales agent.
Oh, wow. Machine to machine.
Right. They exchange API calls, agree on a price, and execute a legally binding contract in milliseconds. But what if the deal goes sideways? What if one agent exploited a logical loophole in the other's reasoning parameters? When two autonomous systems collide and fail, whose governance framework takes the blame?
That is the ultimate 2026 puzzle. If your autonomous agent legally binds you to a catastrophic mistake made by someone else's AI who writes the check.
Exactly.
Think about that as you look at your own company's tech stack this week. Deploying Agentic AI might feel like driving that Formula One car through a minefield, but with a solid lead architecture, those invisible regulatory landmines suddenly become very clear, brightly lit traffic signals.
Yeah.
You can still drive fast, you just have to know when to brake. For more AI insights, visit etherlink.ai.